Maria Thompson had always been a fighter. Born into a modest family in a small town, she learned early on that life wasn't about waiting for things to get better. It was about making them better yourself. Her parents worked hard, her father as a mechanic and her mother as a seamstress, but there was never quite enough money to go around. Still, Maria found joy in helping others, whether it was babysitting her younger siblings or assisting neighbors who needed an extra hand. That spirit of service stayed with her as she grew older. When Maria decided to become a nurse, everyone knew it suited her perfectly. She enrolled in nursing school after high school, juggling classes, late-night study sessions, and part-time jobs to pay her tuition. It wasn't easy. There were days when she skipped meals just to make ends meet, but she never complained. For Maria, the idea of being able to heal people, to ease their pain, and bring comfort to their lives made every sacrifice worth it. After graduation, Maria landed a job at St. Vincent's Hospital, a bustling medical center in the heart of the city. From the moment she stepped into the hospital corridors, she poured her heart into her work. Whether it was calming a frightened child before surgery, holding the hand of an elderly patient during their final moments, or staying late to ensure a new mother felt supported, Maria gave everything she had. Her colleagues admired her dedication, and her patients often praised her kindness. To Maria, nursing wasn't just a profession. It was her calling. But over time, cracks began to show in the system. Budget cuts became frequent, and staff shortages left nurses stretched thin. Maria worked longer hours for the same pay, sometimes skipping breaks altogether, just to keep up with the growing demands. Despite the challenges, she refused to let her patients down. "They need me," she would remind herself whenever exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her. Then came the Friday afternoon that changed everything. Maria sat in a conference room alongside several other employees, listening as the hospital administrator delivered grim news. Due to further funding cuts, layoffs were unavoidable. When they called her name, Maria felt like the floor had fallen out from beneath her. How could this happen? After all these years of loyalty and sacrifice, how could they simply discard her? Walking home that evening, Maria clutched the termination letter tightly in her hand. The weight of it pressed heavily on her chest. Back in her tiny apartment, she stared at the eviction notice taped to her refrigerator, a cruel reminder of yet another battle she couldn't seem to win. Tears streamed down her face as she sank onto the couch, wondering if she'd ever catch a break. Would anyone even notice if she disappeared tomorrow? Yet deep inside, something stirred within Maria, a quiet resilience that had carried her through tough times before. Even as despair loomed large, a small voice whispered, "You've faced worse. You'll find a way." Little did she know, fate had something extraordinary in store for her, something that would not only change her life, but also reaffirm her faith in humanity. The sun rose hesitantly the next morning, casting a soft golden glow over the city. Maria hadn't slept much the night before. Her mind had been racing with worries about bills, rent, and how she'd manage to put food on the table. But staying cooped up in her apartment felt suffocating, so she decided to take a walk. Maybe some fresh air would help clear her head, even if only for a little while. As she strolled down the familiar streets, Maria tried to focus on the beauty around her, the chirping birds, the cool breeze brushing against her cheeks, and the distant laughter of children playing in a nearby park. It was hard, though. Every step reminded her of the uncertainty ahead. She passed by St. Vincent's Hospital, where she'd spent so many years of her life, and her heart ached at the thought of never walking through its doors again. Just as she turned onto Maple Street, a sharp cry pierced the air. "Help! Somebody, please help!" The desperate shout came from across the road. Without thinking twice, Maria sprinted toward the commotion. A small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk, murmuring anxiously. In the center lay a man, his face pale and his body motionless. His expensive suit and polished shoes stood out starkly against the cracked pavement. Maria pushed her way through the onlookers. "Excuse me, I'm a nurse," she said firmly, dropping to her knees beside the man. Her training kicked in instantly. She checked for a pulse. It was faint but present, and noticed the slight bluish tint around his lips. This wasn't just a fainting spell. It was something far more serious. Heart attack, she thought grimly. Call 911. She instructed the bystanders, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. Someone fumbled with their phone, dialing emergency services. Meanwhile, Maria positioned herself over the man and began performing CPR. Her hands moved rhythmically, pressing hard on his chest in measured compressions. 1, 2, 3. She counted under her breath, focusing all her energy on keeping him alive. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Sweat trickled down Maria's forehead, and her arms burned with exertion. But she didn't stop. She couldn't, not when this stranger's life depended on her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the sound of sirens filled the air. Paramedics rushed to the scene, taking over where Maria left off. They worked quickly, stabilizing the man and loading him into the ambulance. As the vehicle sped away, Maria stood there, catching her breath. Her shirt was damp with sweat, and her legs trembled slightly, but she felt a flicker of satisfaction. She'd done what she could. That's when one of the paramedics approached her. "You saved his life," he said, offering a grateful nod. "If you hadn't acted so fast, we might have lost him." Maria shrugged modestly. "I was just doing what anyone else would have done." But deep down, she knew that wasn't entirely true. Many people would have frozen or hesitated, unsure of what to do. Yet here she was, jobless and struggling, still stepping up when someone needed her. A woman from the crowd stepped forward, holding out a bottle of water. "Here, you must be thirsty," she said kindly. Maria accepted it with a quiet thank you and took a sip. As she walked away from the scene, she couldn't shake the feeling that today had been different somehow. Saving that man's life hadn't fixed her problems. It hadn't paid her rent or erased her debts, but it had reminded her of who she was. And maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that things weren't as hopeless as they seemed. The next morning, Maria woke up with a mix of emotions whirling inside her. Part of her wanted to dismiss Richard's visit as nothing more than a kind gesture, polite gratitude from someone who had the means to show it. But another part of her clung to his words. "Trust me, things will look brighter soon." She glanced at the business card on her kitchen table, its glossy surface catching the morning light. Could she really trust him? Or was this just wishful thinking? Still, curiosity got the better of her. After pacing around her apartment for half an hour, she finally picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. Her heart raced as the line rang once, twice. Then a familiar voice answered. "Maria, it's Richard." She swallowed hard, suddenly unsure of what to say. "Hi, Mr. Langley. I'm calling because, well, you told me to." Richard chuckled warmly. "Please, call me Richard. And thank you for reaching out. Listen, I've been thinking about how I can properly express my gratitude. Would you be free to meet later today?" Maria hesitated. "I don't know. What exactly are we talking about here?" "You'll see," he replied mysteriously. "Just trust me, okay? Be ready by noon." Before she could ask any more questions, he ended the call, leaving her even more puzzled. Noon? Trust him. What did that even mean? Maria spent the next few hours alternating between excitement and skepticism. Was Richard planning to give her some money? A gift card, maybe. Whatever it was, she couldn't imagine it being anything life-changing. Not in a million years. At exactly 12 o'clock, Maria heard the sound of engines outside her building. She peeked through the window and froze in disbelief. 4 luxury cars were parked along the curb, each one gleaming under the midday sun. There was a sleek silver Mercedes-Benz, a fiery red Porsche, a polished black Range Rover, and a classic cream-colored Jaguar. People passing by stopped to stare, snapping photos and whispering excitedly. Then Richard stepped out of the first car, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur he claimed to be. He waved up at her window, motioning for her to come down. Heart pounding, Maria grabbed her jacket and hurried outside. As she approached, Richard greeted her with a broad smile. "Surprise," he said simply, gesturing toward the cars. "What? What is all this?" Maria stammered, unable to process what she was seeing. "These are for you," Richard explained, his tone matter-of-fact. "Each one represents a token of appreciation, not just from me, but from friends and colleagues who were inspired by your story." "For me?" Maria echoed, shaking her head in disbelief. "But why? This is too much." Richard placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Because people like you deserve to be celebrated. You saved my life, Maria, and you did it without expecting anything in return. That kind of selflessness deserves recognition and reward." As if on cue, representatives from each car company stepped forward, handing Maria keys and envelopes containing personalized notes. The crowd that had gathered began to clap, their cheers echoing through the street. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes as she accepted the gifts, overwhelmed by the sheer generosity. But Richard wasn't finished yet. "There's more," he added with a wink. "Inside those cars, you'll find something else, something that might help turn your life around completely." Maria didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or pinch herself to make sure she wasn't dreaming. One thing was certain, though. Richard Langley wasn't just grateful. He was determined to change her life forever. In the days that followed, Maria's life transformed in ways she could scarcely have imagined. The condo keys Richard had given her unlocked the door to a stunning apartment in the heart of downtown, a far cry from her cramped, peeling-walled rental. Sunlight poured through large windows, illuminating sleek furniture and modern appliances. It felt like stepping into a dream. But what moved Maria most wasn't the luxury. It was the sense of stability. After years of uncertainty, she finally had a place she could truly call home. The scholarship fund opened another chapter she'd longed for, but never thought possible. Within weeks, Maria enrolled in an advanced nursing program, specializing in pediatric care. Her classes were challenging, but they reignited the passion she carried since her early days as a nurse. She spent hours studying late into the night, fueled by the knowledge that this opportunity had been made possible because of her courage to keep going, even when everything seemed hopeless. But perhaps the most impactful gift was the invitation to join the Langley Foundation. True to his word, Richard welcomed Maria with open arms, introducing her to a team dedicated to improving access to affordable health care. Together, they launched initiatives aimed at underserved communities, mobile clinics, free health screenings, and educational workshops for families struggling to make ends meet. Maria threw herself into the work, channeling her gratitude into action. Every patient she helped reminded her of why she'd chosen this path in the first place. Meanwhile, the stock certificates ensured Maria's financial worries were behind her. For the first time in her life, she didn't have to count every penny or stress over unpaid bills. Instead, she used her newfound security to give back. She started small, donating anonymously to local charities, helping neighbors pay their medical expenses, and sponsoring scholarships for other aspiring nurses. Each act of kindness felt like a ripple effect, spreading the same generosity Richard and his network had shown her. Word of Maria's story spread quickly. Local news outlets picked up on it, sharing how a former nurse who had lost everything ended up inspiring millions. People from all over reached out to thank her, not just for saving Richard's life, but for reminding them of the goodness that still exists in the world. Social media buzzed with messages of hope, many tagging #PayItForwardMaria. Strangers shared their own stories of resilience, crediting Maria's journey with motivating them to persevere through their struggles. Through it all, Maria remained humble. When reporters asked about her whirlwind transformation, she always redirected the focus. "This isn't about me," she'd say earnestly. "It's about what happens when we choose to help others, no matter our circumstances. I saved one life, and look how many people came together to change mine." Richard stayed involved too, often visiting Maria at the foundation, or checking in to see how she was adjusting. Their bond grew stronger with time, built not just on gratitude, but on a shared vision for creating positive change. "You've exceeded my expectations," he told her one evening after a successful clinic launch. "You're proving that kindness doesn't just transform lives, it multiplies." As months passed, Maria realized something profound. These gifts weren't just meant to lift her up, they were meant to empower her to lift others. The cars, the condo, the education, the financial security, all of it was a reminder that even in moments of despair, there is always room for hope. And sometimes that hope arrives in unexpected ways, carried by the very people you least expect to touch your life. For Maria, this was more than a second chance. It was a calling to use everything she'd been given to ensure no one else had to face the hardships she once endured. Little did she know, her journey was only beginning. Maria's transformation wasn't just personal. It rippled outward, touching countless lives in ways she couldn't have anticipated. With her new resources and platform, she became a beacon of hope for those who had almost given up. Her work with the Langley Foundation flourished, but Maria knew she wanted to do more. She envisioned something bigger, something that would directly address the gaps in healthcare access she'd witnessed firsthand during her years as a nurse. Inspired by her own struggles, Maria founded a free clinic in one of the city's most underserved neighborhoods. The Thompson Care Center, as it came to be known, was housed in a renovated building donated by Richard and his foundation. It wasn't flashy or extravagant, but it was functional and filled with warmth. Bright murals painted by local artists adorned the walls, and volunteers greeted patients with smiles that made them feel seen and valued. The clinic offered everything from routine checkups to mental health counseling, all completely free of charge. For many families, it was the first time they'd ever received proper medical care without worrying about how they'd pay for it. Maria worked tirelessly alongside a team of doctors, nurses, and social workers, ensuring that no one walked away feeling neglected or unseen. "Healthcare shouldn't be a privilege," she often said. "It's a basic human right." Word of the clinic spread quickly, drawing people from neighboring towns and even distant cities. Lines stretched down the block on opening day, and Maria greeted each person personally, offering reassurance and compassion. One elderly woman broke down in tears, clutching Maria's hand. "I haven't seen a doctor in 10 years because I couldn't afford it," she confessed. "Thank you for giving me my dignity back." Maria also partnered with schools to provide free health screenings and educational workshops for children. Many kids came from households where illness went untreated due to financial constraints, so Maria made sure the clinic was a safe space where they could ask questions and learn about taking care of themselves. She brought in specialists to talk about nutrition, hygiene, and preventive care, empowering young minds to take control of their futures. Her efforts didn't stop there. Recognizing that systemic issues like poverty and lack of education were often at the root of poor health outcomes, Maria launched programs aimed at addressing these challenges holistically. Job training workshops, literacy classes, and mentorship opportunities became staples of the Thompson Care Center. Families began to see real change, not just in their physical well-being, but in their overall quality of life. As the clinic grew, so did its impact. Local businesses donated supplies, while universities sent interns eager to learn from Maria's leadership. Celebrities and philanthropists took notice too, amplifying her message through fundraisers and awareness campaigns. Yet despite the growing attention, Maria remained grounded. She still rolled up her sleeves every morning, treating patients and mentoring staff. To her, this wasn't about fame, it was about service. One evening, as she locked up the clinic after a particularly busy day, Maria paused to look at the mural above the entrance. It depicted a tree with deep roots, its branches reaching toward the sky. Beneath it were the words, "From kindness grows strength." She smiled softly, remembering how far she'd come since that fateful morning when she saved Richard's life. Back then, she'd felt invisible, as though her struggles were insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Now she realized that every act of kindness, even the smallest ones, had the power to create ripples that could transform entire communities. Maria wasn't just rebuilding her own life, she was helping others rebuild theirs. And in doing so, she discovered a truth she'd always believed, but now lived fully. True wealth isn't measured by what you possess. It's measured by what you give. Maria stood frozen, her fingers trembling as she clutched the keys to the 4 luxury cars. The weight of what was happening began to sink in, but her mind struggled to process it all. Richard's smile widened as he gestured for her to take a closer look inside each vehicle. "Go ahead," he encouraged. "There's more waiting for you." Hesitantly, Maria approached the first car, the sleek silver Mercedes-Benz. Opening the door, she noticed an envelope resting on the driver's seat. Her name was written neatly across the front in bold, elegant handwriting. With shaking hands, she opened it and pulled out a single sheet of paper. It read, "Congratulations, Maria. This condo in downtown is now yours, fully paid off. Welcome home." Beneath the note was a set of keys attached to a small keychain shaped like a house. Her breath caught in her throat. A condo, fully paid off. She turned to Richard, who simply nodded. "No more worrying about rent or eviction notices," he said softly. "You deserve a place to call your own." Before she could respond, he motioned toward the second car, the fiery red Porsche. Inside, another envelope awaited her. This time, the message inside brought tears to her eyes. "Your dream of specializing in pediatric nursing is within reach. Here's a scholarship fund to cover your tuition and expenses." Attached was a detailed breakdown of the account, managed by a reputable educational foundation. For years, Maria had dreamed of returning to school to focus on children's health care, but financial constraints had always held her back. Now, that dream felt closer than ever. The third car, the polished black Range Rover, held yet another surprise. When Maria opened its envelope, she found stock certificates worth a small fortune. The accompanying letter explained that these investments would provide her with long-term financial stability, ensuring she'd never have to worry about making ends meet again. "This is unbelievable," Maria whispered, clutching the documents to her chest. Finally, she moved to the fourth car, the classic cream-colored Jaguar. Its envelope contained a handwritten invitation on thick, creamy paper. It read, "Join us at Langley Foundation, where your passion for helping others can inspire change on a larger scale. Together, we can make a difference." Richard stepped forward as Maria finished reading. "I want you to lead our new initiative focused on expanding access to affordable health care," he explained. "Your experience, compassion, and resilience are exactly what we need." By this point, Maria was overwhelmed. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process everything. The cars, the condo, the scholarship, the financial security, and the opportunity to continue her life's work in a meaningful way. She looked at Richard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Richard's expression softened. "Because people like you remind us of what truly matters. You didn't hesitate to save my life, even when you were struggling yourself. That kind of selflessness doesn't just deserve gratitude, it deserves support. And I'm not the only one who feels this way. My network of friends and colleagues heard your story, and they wanted to be part of giving back to someone who gives so much." As the crowd around them continued to cheer, Maria realized something profound. This wasn't just about her. These gifts weren't just rewards for saving Richard's life. They were a testament to the power of kindness and humanity. By stepping up in someone else's darkest hour, she had unknowingly sparked a chain reaction of generosity. And now she had the chance to pay it forward in ways she never imagined. Still wiping away tears, Maria took a deep breath. For the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't seem so daunting. In fact, it looked brighter than she'd ever dared to hope. Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, Maria returned to her apartment. The events of the day lingered heavily in her mind: the man on the sidewalk, the frantic moments of CPR. and the rush of relief when the paramedics took over. She replayed it all like a movie stuck on repeat, wondering if she truly made a difference. Exhausted but restless, she sat by her window, staring blankly at the city lights. Just as she was about to get up and make herself a cup of tea, there was a knock at the door. Startled, Maria hesitated for a moment. Who could be visiting her at this hour? Cautiously, she opened the door and froze. Standing before her was the man from earlier that day. He looked completely different now. Gone was the pallor of near death. Instead, he stood tall, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit, his face radiating gratitude. "Hi, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said warmly, extending his hand. "My name is Richard Langley. You saved my life today." Maria blinked, unsure how to respond. "Oh, yes, I remember. Are you feeling okay?" Richard nodded, his smile widening. "I am, thanks to you. The doctors told me I wouldn't have made it without your quick thinking. I came here to thank you personally." Embarrassed by the attention, Maria waved him off modestly. "It's really nothing. Anyone would have done the same." But Richard wasn't convinced. He studied her carefully, her tired eyes, the frayed edges of her sweater, and the faint lines of worry etched onto her face. Something about her demeanor suggested she was carrying more than just the weight of the day's heroics. "May I come in?" he asked gently. "I'd like to talk, if you don't mind." Maria hesitated again, but eventually stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. Her tiny apartment was neat but sparse, with peeling wallpaper and second-hand furniture. Richard took it all in silently, his expression thoughtful. They sat down at the small kitchen table, and for a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Richard broke the silence. "I can't begin to express how grateful I am to you, Maria. What you did today, it wasn't just skill. It was courage, compassion, and selflessness. Not everyone would have acted so bravely, especially under the circumstances." Maria shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "Like I said, it's part of who I am. Or who I was, I guess." The words slipped out before she could stop them, tinged with sadness. Richard tilted his head, sensing there was more to her story. "What do you mean?" For a brief moment, Maria debated whether to open up to this stranger, but something about his genuine demeanor put her at ease. Taking a deep breath, she confessed everything. The layoffs at the hospital, the eviction notice, the endless struggle to stay afloat. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, though she tried to blink them away. When she finished, Richard sat quietly, absorbing every word. Then he leaned forward, his voice steady and sincere. "Maria, let me tell you something. People like you are rare. You didn't hesitate to help me, even though you're going through such a difficult time. That kind of goodness doesn't go unnoticed or unrewarded." Before she could protest, Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black business card. He placed it gently on the table between them. "This is my contact information. Tomorrow, I want you to call me. Trust me when I say your life is about to change." Maria stared at the card, then back at Richard, unsure what to think. Was he serious? Could someone like him actually make a difference in her chaotic world? Before she could ask, Richard stood up, offering her a reassuring smile. "Get some rest, Maria. And trust me, things will look brighter soon." As he walked out the door, Maria remained seated, clutching the card in her trembling hands. For the first time in days, a flicker of hope stirred within her. Maybe, just maybe, Richard wasn't exaggerating.